Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of the Rendezvous with Anza Saqib on CxO Global TV. But unlike regular interviews, today we're doing a special session on the budget 2021-2022. Now, it's very interesting that we chose this particular topic um, because we've seen quite a few updates. Now, some of the key developments, and we'll talk about this further, is tax on gold and silver, which has been reduced from 17% to 1 to 3%. 17% tax on value addition of gold will remain. No tax levied on wheat or its byproducts. Revenue target set at 5,800 billion rupees. Tax on 1,000 cc cars is reduced. Tax on milk, yogurt, and other dairy products is being withdrawn. Mobile phone calls over 5 minutes to be taxed. No tax on SMS and mobile internet. Third party, not FPR, to conduct audit of tax evaders. And tax on medical devices has also been withdrawn, among some of the other developments. Now, let me introduce our guests for today. Well, before I do that, I would like to remind you all of who we are and what we do. CxO Global Forum is a knowledge sharing platform, which is invitation only for all C-levels across the globe. We take massive pride in contribution to the knowledge economy with our league of key thought leaders who are not only domain experts, but those that have had a considerable amount of impact on the fields that they're working in. Today, we've got two extraordinary gentlemen talking about the budget and their opinions. Joining us today is Mr. Fahim Sardar. He is the Senior Policy Specialist at SPPC NST, the Government of Pakistan. And Mr. Zishan Ahmed, he's the CEO of Askari Enterprise. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Very much.
Right. So let's cut to the chase. Now, Mr. Zishan Ahmed, starting with you. So the budget 2021 expects to collect 5.83 trillion rupees in taxes. This is 24% more than the estimated 4.69 trillion rupees that Pakistan hopes to collect in the outgoing fiscal. Is this a realistic target?
Thank you very much for having me, Anza, but I'll get straight to the point. I think, in my opinion, this is a very realistic target given the objective and the stance of the government. I think we have followed the FM's vision very closely, and he's come down hard on non-taxpayers. And it's further strengthened in a nutshell about the reductions they've given to us, the taxpayer, wherever possible, and the stance even up to the point where there's talk of arresting people who are not taxpayers. I think if the vision, the commitment is put through, the supporting agencies come in and help, this target is achievable.
Right. Thank you for your opinion. Mr. Fahim Sardar, I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, firstly, thank you to CxO for having me on this interesting discussion, and welcome to all the people who are watching right now. Abhi, the budget is the buzz of the town, and we're trying to make sense of what's happening right now. Anza, you have asked about tax collection, which is 24% higher, which will cross the 5 trillion. It will be shy of 6 trillion. So, I mean, that's it's going to be an interesting effort, because how is this going to be achieved? I mean, prior to going live, as I was discussing with you and Zishan, that although I'm with the government these days, I mean, my obsession still remains with how to get something done. One has to be very practical about how it's going to be done. So interpreting that, for example, 5.8 trillion tax target, which is 24% higher than the last year's, it's going to be achieved through a difference in mindset. Now, what does that mean? Traditionally, the FBR has had a very, on one hand, you have to be hard, and they were hard. And on the other hand, you have to sort of encourage businesses. Right now, as we can clearly see, that the government is trying to be selectively hard. not hard across the board. It's going to be selectively hard. I want you to go back 7 months, approximately 8 months, I guess to be exact. The small traders who had 150 and 300 square feet work areas, they were given fixed tax options of 35,000 and 45,000. I mean, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like a very small amount and you just become a taxpayer. There are more than 3 million traders who were falling in that category. So, I mean, let's look at the numbers for a second. And they were going to collect 250 billion rupees just from that effort. You just do the math. I mean, and these are conservative estimates. If we have, let's say, 3 million taxpayers, let's just start with that number, and you add, let's say, 1.5 million traders, and you add, let's say, other non-taxed people onto that, into that pool of taxpayers, you can actually touch 5 million taxpayers, and you can actually achieve these numbers. And I mean, it's not just to say yes to what the government is saying. I'm from the government, but I'm saying, no, let's throw caution to the wind. Let's be careful. But how do you achieve this? You achieve this by being judiciously hard, by being judiciously
Right.
easy.
Absolutely.
That is well said.
Thank you. Right. Now, it's interesting that Mr. Shaukat Tareen was, he was heard to have said that harassment by the Federal Board of Revenue is a problem for everyone, because of which taxpayers do not file their returns. For this, he also mentioned that the government plans to set up a third party with a legal structure. And in his words, and I quote, "We will only do an audit and talk to the taxpayer," emphasizing that a taxpayer will not be arrested. Now, gentlemen, I would like to hear your view about this, starting with you, Mr. Zishan.
I think it's a welcome change. And I think it's a very chicken and egg situation in general in the past, right? How far of power can be exercised and how much leeway can be given to the taxpayer. The fact that what Fahim said, that a mindset change has come in and it shows in the budget. The fact that they want to make the right decisions, they want to support us, the taxpayers, in ease of doing business and ease of resolving conflict, I think is a very welcome change. And and I'm actually very pleased the way Fahim explained the whole matter in a nutshell. It is every step along the way is to make things easy for us, the taxpayer, but with a very strong mindset change.
It's critical. It's critical.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Fahim, yeah, your thought.
Yeah, same question, I think. Same question.
Yes, please.
A mindset change is extremely important, and Zishan has been, I think, helpful in trying to be positive when you're up against a government. It is extremely important for us to achieve this. I'll come to the third-party audits in a second, but there's one thing that we need to understand. This is Hobson's choice. We don't have a choice anymore. We don't have too many options left. How much buffer is left for us? We've got the highest expense that we have is our debt. Second comes PSDP or the military, whichever way you want to look at it. And then it's going to be, the other one is going to be the third one. So you're not much left for the country. So what is the finance minister trying to do? He's trying to say that, look, there's going to be an impartiality concept in this whole structure. That's where you bring in a third party. I'm still trying to understand how that's going to be done effectively. It might not be that difficult, to be honest, because if you go back once again, 8 months, the government said with the traders that we're not going to ask you any questions. You just pay us this, and we give you a certificate and you're through for the year. So the government is already trying to come up with solutions. So I think what he said about a third party, that's going to be in slightly extreme cases. Not everyone will have to go to a third party auditor to get something done. At least that's how I read it. I mean, I look at things very practically. How is this going to be achieved? For example, if the government were to say that nobody will be audited, so that itself is, how are you going to implement that? And then if you say that everyone is going to be audited, how will you implement that? So Implementation is going to be very critical, I think. And please, Anza, you and Zishan, please correct me if I'm wrong, or if some of our participants would like to correct me. I don't think these audits are meant for everyone. These audits are meant for those tricky cases where you have to sort of justify what you're doing, and section 108, which is the most favorite section for everyone, has to be, you're going to contest it. When someone says, Fahim, aapki ye 100 rupees expense nahi tha, this is your revenue, we're going to treat it as revenue and you're going to pay tax on it. So it's going in that direction, but on this point at least, I'm going to say that the concept is good. How will it be implemented? I'm going to sort of wait and see how the mechanism develops with the relevant boards.
I think, Fahim, I would just like to add one thing. From the business perspective, primarily, where the seat that I sit in, it creates this layer of arbitration. At this point, between myself and the authorities, there is no layer of arbitration. It's either me being right or them being wrong. I think the third party auditor will be able to bring and knock some sense on both sides.
Absolutely, it'll be more of a confidence building measure. Yeah, it'll be more of a confidence building measure for sure.
I think absolutely, and what Zishan just said right now, and Anza, what you're saying about confidence is the key to business. People are investing in bankrupt economies. I won't take any names right now. They're running to those economies, and when you tell them those countries are bankrupt, they're like, no, we have confidence in their economy and we're happy. So, that's faith for you. But the point is, what Zishan just highlighted, that look, at least the government is willing to listen to someone else. Otherwise, it is the tax investigator or the tax authority that is the full and final. They can say whatever they want. Section 108, if I'm quoting it correctly, can be exercised at any point. You can spend the next 5 years going to courts just to justify that those 100 rupees were my expenses, they were not my revenue.
Absolutely. Now, moving on, one key area which did see a lot of emphasis was the small and medium enterprises. Now, while presenting the budget 2021-2022, Finance Minister Shaukat Tareen expressed the importance of SMEs. He said it was unfortunate they were provided only 6% of the banking credit. In the budget, he promised to prioritize funding for SMEs as well. What are your comments regarding this, starting with Mr. Zishan?
I think, again, it's a welcome change, but here is where I will start to differ just a bit. I think more than funding, a larger picture needs to come in. The SME is not just cash strapped, they're infrastructure strapped as well. The SME can't fulfill their own needs the way a larger organization can. Giving them the money, but not the infrastructure to be able to cycle that money or bring velocity into it, will eventually create a lot of bad debt. I have a very strong reservation on the approach. I think the intent is good, but the approach is a little short-sighted.
Absolutely, I agree. Yes, Mr. Fahim Sarwar.
Yeah, SMEs, there are, if someone wants to take a guess, do you know how many SMEs there are in Pakistan right now? And even I was shocked when I first found out there are more than 5 million SMEs in Pakistan, and who basically don't have any, what to talk of funding. They have no mentorship, they have no professional guidance provided, they don't have those, that regulatory structure which that they can adhere to. I'll give an example. I'm basically from corporate. When I set up my own company called Tangent, the moment I got my corporate unique identification number, 5 minutes later, I got an email from FBR welcoming me to the net. And that was a net of 24%. I'm not joking here. It's like 24% overnight you have to pay tax. Whether you earn 100 rupees or whether you earn 100 billion rupees as an SME, that's irrelevant. You are now in the tax net. So there are, as drawing on what Zishan said about infrastructure, I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be sort of fixed. Focusing specifically on financing, the government has been pretty keen to build that up. Now, here we have to sort of focus on organizations like SMEDA. SMEDA was very aptly, very rightly designed to focus on the SME sector, to sort of be the technical, infrastructural, financial guide to SMEs. But over the years, I guess things sort of, one tends to, yeah, things tend to get a little blurry, let's just say. So with SMEs, there have been issues. Perhaps it's a two-sided issue, but I would take the side of the SMEs, to be very honest, because I myself am originally from the private sector. But having said that, my main contention here is that whatever happens, your SME is going to be your backbone, not the large companies. And the day you start to think that the large companies are going to be the backbone of your country or your economy, that's not going to be good. You have countries like Germany, you have Japan, even America. We get dazzled by these big names, and people don't realize that these economies, especially Germany and Japan, I'm taking examples, they basically are built on, they rely on SMEs. Let's not just get lost by the big names. So the government is trying to fund them, trying to at least provide infrastructure there. I can assure all the viewers right now, a new policy regarding SMEs is being discussed. I won't get into it. And the government is extremely sensitive, has become very sensitive to these three alphabets, SME. And it's going to take a little while. It's an evolutionary process. So let's see what the next step will be. But this financing thing is a step in the right direction. But as Zishan said, one has to be very cautious about how you lend to an SME. Typically, they should be going for equity investments, not debt investments.
Right. Now, funding. Sorry, go on, Zishan.
I was just going to say that, Fahim, the problem, because we've seen this in the banking sector. We've seen this in the microfinance sector. Lending initially goes out really quickly because the idea is so novel, so bright, but the execution, if not backed by a good policy, will take us right down to a ditch we don't want to be in. Further, Fahim, the other thing that I have always struggled to understand in budgets, why is SME just one term? Because this in itself is a larger philosophy that needs very different treatment for very different sectors within the SME.
Yeah, I agree with you.
True.
And
yes, a blanket approach is not going to work, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if I can just add here that let's go back to that tax thing I said about the traders and the 150 square feet, size traders and 300 square feet traders. The moment you start bringing these people into your tax net, and when they start standing outside a tax commissioner's room, that is the day people actually start to take them seriously. That, my God, this is also a business. Our taxation structure is geared towards big businesses.
Guys.
It's not geared towards the average Fahim who set up his company and launched it and is working hard. I'll give you another example. I mean, I'm ex-SECP, so I requested the registrar, because since I'm ex-SECP, I tend to take liberties with them. So when I registered my company, I said, can I have a list of all the 110 other 1,000 companies that are registered with you? So they started laughing. They said, pay for it. I said, no, give it to me for free. They wouldn't give it to me. I said, and then, there was a discussion, it got serious. And then I said, listen, charge us, but allow us to talk to other registered companies. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. I mean, these infrastructural things need to be done as well, so that businesses start talking to each other. And
right.
I repeat, this investment, and I hope the government turns it into equity investment rather than debt. Yeah. Anza, can you hear me? Anza, can you hear me? Anza, can you hear me?
We lost her.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
Sure.
So
no, we're here.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, I
Go
just,
on.
I hope it didn't cancel out. So, I mean, I was done with my comments, so perhaps you'd
Right.
like to.
Now, speaking about, funding and lending in particular, and how we need to be um, quite proactive in our approach of who we lend to, how much we lend, so on and so forth. The government has also decided to provide interest-free loans for up to 500,000 rupees to the poor. Do you think this is a good step to help the poor establish themselves, or for poverty alleviation? Starting with you, Zishan.
No, I'm going to be very brutal about this. I think it's a terrible idea. And I think it's a terrible idea. Fahim already understands why I'm going to saying it's a terrible idea. If there is no objectivity involved in something, that money will never show its benefit. Like, I'm not against giving money to people, but that money needs to bring some return back to the exchequer. What happens after that money goes out, right? There's got to be a way to sanctize and bring sanity into the model. So it's very new, it's very novel, but I am actually not very for it for the reasons I've just said.
That's an interesting opinion. Fahim, do you have a similar view?
I actually do. And I would just add to the caution that Zishan rightly pointed out. And I'll give you 3 examples to back it up. Giving somebody, a family a loan is not the issue. It's how you're going to do it, how you're going to back it up, how you link it to a business. With that, I haven't not heard of. And where I can, I'm going to try to push that. Every loan that is given has to be backed up by a business, by a not a consumption, but a generation system. I'll repeat that. In Pakistan, we're consumption oriented. We take a loan to consume, that's not the purpose of a loan. We've misunderstood it. We take a loan to generate more revenue. And I mean, many people will disagree with me that no, of course we take a loan for more business. Actually, we don't. So I could tell you a joke that I once came across when I was working at Saudi Park Investment, but I know that I don't think we have time for that. So to give you a few examples, and I'll try to be brief about it. If you take the example of Grameen Bank, Grameen was, people don't, I'm surprised we're not, in Pakistan at least, we're not talking about it. Grameen Bank and other banks that have been successful, they went into, this is microfinance linked with a business. So women were doing business at home in Bangladesh, and they were funded, and they had a very interesting way of collecting money, collecting the interest and whatever, the principal, because they just wouldn't let it accumulate. Go to Peru, same thing. If you go to Colombia, same thing. If you, in any successful financing mechanism, microfinancing mechanism as mass as this, because this falls in that category, has to be backed up by a business. If for example, I'm just giving an example. If I get this loan, I have to have a business to back it up. But right now, I did not see that clause. So that will turn into a handout. Handouts are dangerous, and handouts will never ever bring people out of poverty. If China brought out, let's say, 500 to 750 million people out of poverty, it was because everyone was working, and they were able to use those micro businesses to build themselves up.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely a pertinent point to be making, and one keeps wondering, what exactly does the government have in mind? Are we trying to, go towards being more welfare state, or are we trying to, simply give to people more than what we have? For instance, it's often when we're younger, we get really excited about giving someone something that we do not actually possess. So are we going to overlend? Are we going to exhaust our resources in this manner? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now,
I think
another, another interesting point that we saw with the budget was that there was a lot of emphasis on the PM's initiatives, including Kamyab Jawan, Kisan programs. Now, are these living up to their promises? Because I went to one of the ceremonies with the Kamyab Jawan program, and I saw that yes, some of the young people were getting loans about 2.5 lakhs, 5 lakh rupees. Um, what do you think would be the utility of them? Do you think they live up to their promises? Yes, no? Starting with you, Zishan.
Look, I think these programs like Kamyab Jawan and Kamyab Kisan, these are long-term programs. There is something that I want to put out on a larger scale for the listeners and generally for all of us. These budgets are not short-term achievements. These kind of programs, they lost a legacy larger than the government itself. So for us to be able to say, this thing's a success or this thing's not doing well, I think the concept is right, the initiative is right. As long as the policy and KPI management is in place, those things I don't have a horizon to, but I would like to hope that they are in place. And given due time, you should be able to see good results come out of them. But to say something at this point in time would be irrational. But I do see good things coming out of them.
You did make a pertinent point where you said that when a new government comes in, we've seen shifts in perspective with the Benazir Income Support Program, which later became the SRS program. Oftentimes, with in a democracy and in our country in particular, we have seen that promises are made and some funds are disseminated, but when there is a change of the regime or the government, we see huge handicaps. Fahim, what's your take on the matter?
Sorry, yeah. Okay, whenever you have these programs, they are targeted programs. For example, Kamyab Jawan obviously is for the youth, and the Kisan programs for farmers. So we'll go in reverse. The Kisan program has actually been in the short term, it's been quite successful in bringing forward certain products which not completely, which want to, but they want to, which have partially circumvented the Aarti. It's not an easy thing to do because the Aarti is an integral part of our society, like the Tehsildar and the SHO and things like that. These things are important and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just how they function and to what extent they are able to influence the concepts of demand and supply. So when you look at Kisan program, I mean, Kisan program, they've come to the Kisan card. Of course, these cannot be, you cannot just judge it immediately. Launching a product is one thing, but then launching it for a successful fiscal year at the very least, and then seeing how it affects the whole economy is a separate issue. The direction is right. Coming to the Kamyab Jawan is basically there to focus on employing the youth, building the youth, giving them some kind of an outlet, either business-wise or skill-wise or whatever. It remains to be seen that how, I think let's give it a quarter, let's give it 3 months at least, because one thing I know, the government is taking stock of everything. They are calculating everything. If a project has been launched, okay, what will happen? Well, what do we get? What do we get in return? As Zishan was saying, you have to, everything has to be seen from an investment's perspective. If you invest 100 rupees, you should get more than 100 later. But if 100 is invested in, sorry?
I say at the least.
At the least.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you invest 100 and you end up with, let's say 70, I mean, something went terribly wrong. Something went terribly wrong. I mean, I'm an investment specialist. So I mean, for me, getting a 5% return is not that glamorous, but it's better than getting a 30% loss. So it's important to understand how they will be evaluated. I'm pretty sure mechanisms are being put into place that this is the overarching concept. this is how it's going to be implemented, and these mechanisms need to be looked at. And it's going to be a long process. It's not an overnight thing.
Right. Now, whenever, so far, whenever the budget was analyzed or criticized, a lot of analysts did make the statement that this budget in particular was heavily influenced by one, going to the IMF, two, the pandemic playing a greater role. What is your take on the statement, Zishan?
I think it's as true as it gets. These two are prevalent problems. They're prevalent conditions for every country. Well, the pandemic, especially for every country. These are our realities. These are realities we live with, and these are the realities that we have to tackle. So yeah, it is influenced. It is driven to solve those two problems. Not really a big deal, I think.
Mm-hmm. And your take on it, Fahim? Do you think
The
any other
pandemic,
key factors played a role apart from the pandemic and then going to IMF?
I'll give you an example, and you'll start wondering why exactly am I bringing this up. If you take the 1929 market crash in the United States of America, that was one of the worst things supposedly that could have happened to the United States economy, but actually that gave birth to the new economy, which was far more powerful than their previous economy. So sometimes you need a pandemic, you need a cataclysm, you need I always ask people, what's your trauma? What's your trauma? So sometimes you need a trauma to reconfigure yourself. And what Pakistan has done is Pakistan has reconfigured itself to a slightly more distant, physically distant economy, but more active digitally. And as we are right now, we're on a webinar, which is, this might sound a little weird for people, but we need to understand how many webinars and electronic discussions have you had in the last 14 months, sorry. Just think about it. Prior to that, it was not so prevalent. Now it is. So this budget has, in the same manner, been shaped, configured by the pandemic. And since you have very few options left, one way to deal with the problem is to grow out of it. You push yourself into growth, and you just you try to get through the sludge. You try to get through the mud where your tires are stuck. So this budget is completely based on the problems that the pandemic created, and we need to grow very fast to get out of this problem. Otherwise, this vicious cycle will get tighter.
Absolutely. No, makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the things that I keep hearing from different people, because I interview people almost every day, there's a recurring theme. Is this budget realistic or overly optimistic? Now, one can say that the mood in the government circles generally after years is triumphant, and more importantly, as far as I can remember, the talk now is not of stabilization or crisis management like we saw in the previous budgets, but of growth. And remittances are at record levels. Exports are showing some growth. There are obviously the fears of current account deficits being low. However, generally, it seems like a happy, positive picture. Now, unfortunately, gentlemen, we're running low on time today, and it's been, a lovely experience hearing your thoughts. So, towards an end note, I would like to ask you, do you think that the budget, this current one, will live up to its expectations? Starting with you.
Look, I'll just summarize the entire discussion because that will answer this question. We've talked about 2-3 things that are new to this budget. Taxpayer net mindset, what Fahim told us was an example. The emphasis on dealing with non-taxpayers, creating transparency with existing taxpayers, supporting programs which we may initially have, or I at least may have some issues with them, but at least we're in the right direction with the fundings, with all the programs. So in net, I think for me, as someone whose professional trajectories get impacted by this budget has achieved something that other budgets have not. That's a mindset change, which Fahim said in that many words. That mindset change alone is far greater of an achievement than what other budgets could possibly do. Now, to come down to the numbers, I think the predictions, the trajectories, and the approach is optimistic. But I'd rather support an optimistic trajectory approach and get ahead that much. May not be an A grade, but at least we'll be far better than where we are today.
Well, that's a good way to see the glass half full. Mr. Fahim Sardar.
That's, I think, a very right way of putting something forward, because look, perhaps I'm not the right person to talk to, because I'm with the government right now, but I'm from corporate, and I was always up against impossible odds, and ended up doing things. So I'll try to sort of qualify my answer by being a little bureaucratic here, if you allow me. Trying. So the budget is going to have challenges, and they need to be very stringently handled. It's going to be a horse that's going to buck. So you have to keep the reins either very tight when you need to, and you need to let go when you need to, because you cannot just have a tight rein concept or a loose rein concept. So one has to be, I'll put it in another way, which I typically describe, which is at the strategic level, the government has come up with a new concept. Let's grow out of this. At the operational and tactical level, you're going to have to be very agile. And if the government, which is going to be agile, you'll be able to sort of navigate through the tricky points, because you're going to have good months of business and tax, and you have bad months of the business and tax. So you need to balance it out. And sometimes you need to let the horse loose. Sometimes you need to tighten the horse.
Right. Absolutely. You very aptly summarized your take on it. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Zishan. Thank you for all
Thank you, Fahim. Pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Please keep us updated with your comments and feedback. If you'd like to know more about Mr. Fahim Sardar or Mr. Zishan, we've shared some links in the description below. My ending thoughts on the topic are that whether you agree with the statement or not, one thing that the budget has managed to do is, just like the PM had said earlier, everyone will be happy with the budget. And generally what I am listening to, all the people that I'm speaking to, everyone seems happy right now. Let's all hope and pray that the budget keeps us happy for the rest of his tenure. With that, take care of yourselves, and please keep watching. We'll see you next time with another interesting topic. Thank you, gentlemen.